Good evening and welcome to the Hoosier Huddle podcast. Today's episode is after the dust settles on spring practice. Indiana wrapped up their spring practice last Saturday with their hopefully becomes an annual spring football Saturday event in Bloomington. I know I enjoyed my time down there. Beautiful weather. What a difference a week makes in weather here in the Midwest as well. I'm joined by Andy Graham, and we're going to talk about spring practice. Andy and I were both at several practices this spring. We'll give our impressions on the offense. We'll give our impressions on the defense. Um, Also talk about the spring football game, if you want to call it a game, the spring football day, and then a look ahead to what IU needs to do over the summer to have a successful fall. It is an important season for Tom Allen and the Hoosiers, and it all starts with spring practice. So, welcome, Andy. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing really well, thanks. Thanks for having me, Sammy, as always.
Always good to talk IU football with Andy Graham. Let's uh, let's start on the offensive side of the ball. It's the most fun side to talk about in terms of playmakers and things like that. At least in my opinion, I know a lot of people like talking defense as well. But we'll start with offense. A lot of new faces. Um, and some skill positions from the transfer portal, including quarterback Taven Jackson. There is a quarterback battle in Bloomington. It's not one of these, oh, we're holding our cards close to our vest to keep Ohio State from knowing what we're going to run and things like that. I believe this is a legitimate two-man race for the number one starter. It seemed to go when I was back down in Bloomington. Um, One guy would have a great day, another guy would have a great day the next day, and it kind of went back and forth. And then, so let's talk about the quarterback position, Andy. It seems like it's a two-man race between Taven Jackson and Brandon Sorsby, both redshirt freshmen. Jackson saw game time with Tennessee last year. Sorsby saw a little bit of game time with IU. And just based on Tom Allen's comments, it does seem like a two-man race with Brock Lowry taking that developmental year and it being the kind of long shot third runner in that room. What were your impressions from of the quarterback room this spring?
I think you summed it up well. I even like the third guy. Yeah, Brock Lowry impressed me too. When I got to see him, he can really scoot. Just to mention him first, and then we'll talk about the two primary candidates to be the starter. But I don't know if this is fair to the kid, but I'm just going to say it. I mean, Lowry to me looks a lot like Peyton Ramsey with a better arm, which is a very good thing. What I don't know whether or not he possesses is the kind of just sort of moxie and guts and instincts that Peyton Ramsey had. I mean, Peyton Ramsey won when he was at Indiana, then he went to Northwestern and won there as well. He was just a winner, coach's kid, had a really good intuitive grasp of the game. But just watching him play, I mean, Brock Lowry reminds me of him quite a bit. He's the fastest of the three quarterbacks, I think, just from just from my observation this spring. But all three of them can run, and I agree with you. There were times when Taven Jackson looked like he might be separating himself a little bit, and other times when Sorsby looked great. And I guess the good news is they both impressed me. I know that we have to couch our comments in the context of the fact that neither of them have anything appreciable in regard to college snaps, really. I mean, they're both whomever is the starting quarterback against Ohio State is going to be confronting the Buckeyes with not a whole lot of experience behind him. But I think from a physical tool point of view, I'm nothing but encouraged. I mean, Brandon Sorsby. I mean, not to once again, it's probably an unfair comparison, but I'm trying to give folks an idea of what these guys look like who haven't got a chance to see them yet very much. He looks like kind of a a Josh Allen type of guy to me. He's a big kid, big athlete who can run, and I mean really run. Looks like he's strong. He probably has the strongest arm of the three. When they had the long toss contest on Saturday. Sorsby won that by about 5 yards, I think it was.
And
Um,
second place was Josh
and
Henderson.
yeah, which was impressive too in its own way. Little
He was a
halfback
ringer.
pass action
Josh
was just
Henderson played
yeah,
quarterback in high school, so he was a ringer. I talked
right.
to his uncle after the game.
Well, anyway, yeah, maybe Josh can unload a bomb after taking a pitch this year sometime. But Sorsby, I mean, I know you took some unofficial stats Saturday. I mean, Sorsby was 8 of 11 for 120 and a touchdown. It really had a nice day. And Taven Jackson played well too. And what I liked about Taven, um, and we got to see 2 full quarters of action here, basically half of a game with actual, football being played pretty much. And what I liked from Taven was that he really seemed to be intuitive in regard to moving in the pocket, keeping his eyes downfield, looking where plays could be made, and then trying to get the ball there. And pretty successfully. I mean, he threw for 99, according to you, 8 of 14. There were a couple of passes broken up. One was intercepted, and one was broken up in the end zone that he threw that were really good throws. It's just the defensive back made a good play. I think there was one that hit went right into the chest of the receiver, and I think it was Minor. I think the transfer kid that knocked it away. And then you had another situation where the receiver from Clemson gets open, and he got the ball there, but the defensive back just ripped it away for an interception. So I
Yeah,
thought Taven threw well also, and Brock Lowry was 3 for 3. So you had the quarterbacks go a combined 19 of 28 for 254 and a couple of touchdowns and a half of football, and so it was pretty good. I mean, I think that McCulley, who had the one pass knocked away from him, probably had the play of the day when he had that one-handed catch on the sideline too. So I just saw a lot of things that were frankly encouraging. If you're just talking about skill set and tools that kids have that could translate well to the football when the real tackling starts. And I also thought, I don't know about you, but looking at the quarterbacks running, uh, in addition to the running backs, who we'll talk about here in a second, but the quarterbacks all showed good escapability, especially Taven Jackson.
yes,
And
and
who
they
knows
look
how
comfortable throwing on the run too.
they all absolutely and keeping their eyes downfield. And I don't know, what kind of stats all of those guys might have put up running the ball, but of course it was a controlled scrimmage. So if anybody even laid a finger on them, the whistle would blow. And so it's a bit hard to gauge exactly how many yards rushing they could have added to their passing totals. But they were under pressure a lot. We'll talk about the defensive line in a little bit, but Andre Carter and those guys were, in the backfield quite a bit, and the quarterbacks handled it pretty well, I thought. And I think as an IU observer, I'm comfortable with either guy winning the job at this point. I mean, I think that I think it'll be an ongoing, competition, and both guys look good. Both guys look talented. Both guys are reasonably tall. Sorsby's a bigger athlete than Taven, and Taven's probably a little quicker just in terms of twitch kind of quickness. I don't know. I mean, I'd be hard pressed at this point to name a starter myself just based on my uh, observation, but I think both options are pretty good.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like, and to me, the comfortability of them throwing on the run. You talked about the EJ Williams. I think it was
Yeah,
Jameer Johnson
it was
picked
Jameer
it off,
Johnson. Yep.
ripped it away from him. That was a throw where Taven scrambled a long ways and found EJ Williams in the back, put it right on him,
Yeah.
and the defensive back made a really nice play. Some people say EJ Williams probably should have won that catch, but it was not a no look Hail Mary to the back of the end zone and
No.
and a 50-50 ball. Taven saw it was a very small window. He saw it. He took a chance, threw it in there, but he gave his guy a 50-50 chance of coming down with the ball, and maybe a little better than
No. It
that.
was. That's just it, exactly. I mean, it was the only interception of the day, but it wasn't a reckless throw. It wasn't a bad throw. It was a good throw. On the other,
Yeah.
it was the opposite. It was really making a play and putting it right on the receiver. And the fact is, the defensive back just ripped it away from the receiver. But I mean, it was a really good play by Taven, but it goes down as a pick.
Yep. Andy, we have Alex Compton joining us today.
Good.
Alex, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you guys? Doing well. It's nice to talk about a little IU football this spring.
Yeah, we're doing well. Anytime we get to talk to Andy Graham about IU football, it's special. Alex, we're talking about the offense and what we've seen this spring. Going into we've talked about the quarterbacks. We're going to talk about the receivers now. The receiver room has been built up, and I think it's the most diverse room, receivers wise, that IU's had in a handful of years. And I'll count Jalen Lucas as a wide receiver too. To me, he's an all-purpose back. He's been used in the backfield at running back. He could be used in the slot. But you also have guys like Donovan McCulley, who Andy said earlier he had one of the plays of the day. And I don't want to discount Cam Perry's diving catch either. It's a one-handed grab, a nice play by Donovan McCulley. He's slimmed down and has gotten quicker. EJ Williams looks like a real deal, former five-star transfer at a Clemson.
Yep.
He looks like he could be a real player. And I know in a couple practices I went to when they scrimmaged, he blew by the defense a couple of times where he's wide open. So that's a weapon that IU hasn't had in the past. Cam Perry has come on really well, and it might not even be a sleeper pick anymore because that's how above the radar he has become this spring. But he's another smaller guy, quick guy. You could put in the slot. You could use on different actions as well. And it'd be interesting to see when him and Jalen Lucas are on the field what they do. Do they use one of them as a decoy? Because everybody's eyes are going to be keyed on Jalen Lucas. Do you do a double reverse? Things like that. Other receivers, Jaquez Smith. I thought he didn't do much in the spring game, but he was a guy who's kind of been buried with injuries and kind of the forgotten man out there. He's a former four-star recruit. But I thought he stood out this spring while I was there, Andy, as well. And I know I'm forgetting some guys on
Well,
the wide receiver group, but
You're
think
forgetting maybe I think one of the most interesting guys on the whole roster, and that's Omar Cooper.
Cooper.
And I think
Yep.
He flashed
obviously
the spring too. Yep.
you're right. Yeah, he redshirt last year, and he's a former four-star in-state guy that a lot of schools wanted, and a lot of schools went after hard, as did IU, obviously. But Omar Cooper likely slots in as your starting punt returner this year. And then that's a guy we talk about Cam Perry. Cam Perry and Omar Cooper, if they both play in the slot, that's a pretty dynamic yet unproven duo in the slot there. But Omar Cooper is the guy I keep looking at as one. I can't believe they got him to redshirt or allowed him to just not play last year. And two, it's, how much can he handle, and is he ready to handle it this year? I think you need him. I think he's going to have to play, and I think he's going to have to be good. But Andy, before I get to you, he's the guy. And then I think the different body types IU has at receiver now. I think that's something we haven't had. I think you got McCulley called them like my twin. So you got 2 6'4", legit 6'4" guys, and Williams and McCulley on the outside. You have Cam Camper kind of as your house money, waiting to come back, rehabbing right now. And then Sammy's favorite guy, DeQuise Carter, the transfer from Fordham, not in right now. That's a guy that's going to play, and a guy that I think is going to be good. So I think you have 4 of those kind of bigger body type guys, and then you mix in some of these quicker slot guys. To me, the question is, are the slot guys who are pretty unproven, are those guys ready to play? I think that's going to be a huge story of the offense this season.
Well, and you can always put Jalen Lucas in the slot, and I think they'll do that quite a bit. I'm excited about it. It's really a dynamic and diverse group. we just mentioned the guys at the slot, but also you have a situation where uh, you've got guys who could 6'4" type guys who can go high point the ball. The kid from Fordham specializes in that, I think,
Yeah.
and Donovan McCauley looks so much better and so much more comfortable out wide now than he did last fall. And he just should be a consistent weapon in and around, the end zone. I think Indiana should be able to be fairly efficient in the red zone, to be honest, throwing into the end zone because they've got guys who can go up and get it now, in addition to the smaller guys. And Williams, you can see why he was a 5-star coming out of high school with him and Jalen Lucas. Honestly, as long as I've been around IU football, I don't know if I've seen two receivers faster than those two guys on the same team here. I don't know
No,
that I have. I mean, we're talking about serious jets. And then Camp Perry is right there too, and Omar Cooper's pretty much right there too. There are other guys who could really, really go. So it's exciting. They have height, they have speed, and they have depth. We just tossed out pretty much a 3 deep version of a wideout room in terms of depth. And so theoretically, at least, they ought to be able to figure out a way to have a really good unit on the field next year.
Yeah, and then the other guy I want to touch on quickly is Anderson Kobe, transfer from
Yes.
Tennessee,
Yep.
who we kind of
Yep.
thought was an afterthought heading into the season last year. Had a decent season, some drops and a fumble, but I think he's a guy that's going to play as well, and a guy that was pretty solid, all things considered last year. So yeah, I think the room itself is real deep. I think it's exciting. I know you guys just both touched on the quarterback position, but that really is, as it always goes in football, going to be kind of the tail of the season. But I do think this year it's not going to be because of a lack of weapons on offense that the offense won't be good if it's not good. So I think again it comes down to the same things it always does. I feel like, and the same things we always talk about, but the offensive line and the quarterback position. But I do like the receiver room. I think the running back room is good enough to win. But
Yep.
yeah, I think the receiving group could be the best and the deepest on the team in terms of position group.
yeah, let's talk about the offensive line a little bit. And it's tough to judge on a spring game when there's no real tackling and things like that. But I thought throughout spring practice, the addition of Bob Bostad, you could tell the difference right away in his philosophy, how he practices, the toughness and physicality he brings to practice, the going against the defensive line in practice, which at least the times that I've been down there, you really didn't see under the previous offensive line coaches. But it's you could see that he's putting his stamp on it. Is it where it needs to be? Probably not. But any coach is going to tell you that in spring that nobody is where they need to be in spring practice. But Andy, what was your feeling on the offensive line? I know that they had a real trouble blocking Andre Carter, but I think a lot of people are going to have trouble blocking Andre Carter. What was your takeaway from the offensive line in the spring game?
Yeah, I wish I could be more definitive in my observations, but I don't know. There's no reason to be discouraged, but also I'm not sure how much I saw a line coalesce either. I did hear certain guys had really good springs. I did hear that. And once again, they were basically playing without Matt Bedford, who was able to do quite a bit of workout kind of related stuff, and he was on the field. He just couldn't do contact stuff yet, but he'll be fully healthy by the fall. And I heard Zach Carpenter had a really good summer, or sorry, really good spring. Heard Mike Kadick had a really good spring. So we'll see. But the one thing that I did get a definite impression about was that there's going to be a real emphasis on technique and physicality and toughness, all of that stuff. We did see everybody does hamburger drills. We have people have different names for it, where you've got mano a mano in a contained space, and the defensive player has to tackle the running back and the offensive player has to dislodge the defensive player out of the hole essentially. But we saw more of that and more variations of that, when I was out there for spring practice, and just a real emphasis on toughness and a real emphasis on technique. And so personally, I really think that's a very good thing for Indiana football. I think the offensive line has needed both of those components to be much better, and that's been true for a while. So, how fast can Bosted make progress in those areas in terms of toughness and technique? I don't know. I do think there's enough raw material, enough talent on the offensive line that it should be an adequate unit. And I thought that really for the last couple of years when it was a disastrous unit. I didn't think it was a talent problem. And I still don't think it was a talent problem. And I think with Bosted in charge, I don't know how long it'll take to see results, but I don't know, if you guys would agree with this or not, but even when there was a change in the offensive line coach this past year and Rod Carey stepped into the role, I thought the offensive line improved quite a bit just in half a year, just under him. So I'm thinking, I'm reasonably optimistic. As I said, I think that it could be at least an adequate unit and should be, frankly. And if it is, this could be a successful offense if the quarterback situation works out well.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And how different would the season have looked last year with just a competent offensive line, not asking
Yeah,
for
exactly.
all Big Ten level play, not asking for all America level play, but just competent scheming and just positioning, really. And I think you're looking at potentially a bowl team last year, but it's been one of Allen's fatal flaws so far in his tenure is that why did it take him so long to make a move that everyone else in and around the program could see and knew had to be made? So, because you nailed it, Andy, I think in the 5 games you had Rod Carey as offensive line coach, you did see improvement almost immediately, which is pretty damning if you ask me. But yeah, as you look at the roster, I think you have a good mix of positions, obviously, and then I think you also have a good mix of classes. So I think you have
Hmm.
experienced guys,
Yep.
guys ready to start playing, and then some young guys, which is good roster construction. And Sammy and I always talk about it, Andy, but the guys Indiana has in the offensive line room are guys other schools and other high major programs wanted. It's
Yes.
not like these are not players that we beat out MAC schools for or FCS schools for. These are legitimate Power Five recruits that IU beat other schools out for. And I think the talent's there. I think you look up and down and anchored by Bedford. Hopefully he's ready. All indications are that he will be. He seems pretty fired up and ready to go. Khalil Benson, I thought made a jump last year, but he's kind of the guy we've been hearing all off season as the whoa, like the head turner. So you got him, then you got Carpenter, and I think accounts of Max Longman have been pretty good. The UMass transfer, I think he could mix in at center as well. And then your 2 young tackles, Bray Lynch, Carter Smith. I think I like both of those guys. But the guy to me really, and he's TJ, one of our Hoosier Huddle guys' favorite, is DJ Moore, the red shirt from Fort Wayne. I
Hmm.
think he's a potential all Big Ten guard at some point in his career. I think he's the guy when I look kind of at the depth chart, the Mike Kadich at left guard. I think that's the one you kind of look at, and DJ Moore is kind of licking his chops a little bit here. I thought Mike played a little bit better last year than he did the year before, but I think DJ Moore is going to be real tough to keep off the field here, and I think he's definitely going to crack 2 deep. But that's a guy you could plug in and be like, man, how did IU get him? I think IU beat him out over Notre Dame and Oregon, Sammy, if I remember like his final 3. But he's a legit 6'5", 320. And
Well,
I think he's just a people mover. And
uh,
I think he's a guy that's gonna see the field, whether the guys ahead of him or the coaching staff are ready. I think he's a guy that's gonna see the field this year.
yeah, I tell you what, when I watched his high school film, it reminded me of the time I was sitting in my office at the Herald Times, and called up the film on a guy named Dan Feeney, who had just committed to IU out of the Chicago suburbs. And I checked out his film. I go, holy mackerel. This guy looks like he could really play. And I saw the pulling, I saw the dominance, I saw the kind of nasty that you want to see, in terms of the ferocity of his play, just in his high school film. And DJ Moore, I felt exactly the same when I saw his film. And another guy that we haven't mentioned, who I think is going to be a big key next year, is Khalil Benson. That and partially because just from what I'm hearing around the program, they think he could play tackle as well, and they think he could do a good job at tackle. So they're excited about him, and I think they liked both of the true freshman tackles that they brought in last year, Carter Smith and Bray Lynch. And I think Tom mentioned Carter Smith directly the other day as a kid who's come on. So once again, I think there's plenty of talent there. Vinny Fiacable's another kid. They think Cooper Jones has made a successful transition from defense to offense. They really think he's got potential there. So once again, we're tossing out a lot of names, and there should be enough, there to make a good unit out of. We haven't even mentioned Josh Sales yet either. So I mean, to me, I've watched Purdue have functional offensive lines in recent seasons, and that's a little bit misleading in the sense that they run a different kind of offense where the ball gets out of the quarterback's hand really quickly and whatnot. But Purdue still had a functional offensive line, and I'm here to tell you that their recruiting on the offensive line wasn't anywhere near as impressive as Indiana's was, and yet their line seemed to be able to function fairly well, and ours did not. And I think it comes down to coaching. And I'm excited about the fact that I think Indiana's got a top, really an elite offensive line coach now. And I'm pretty jazzed up about that. I mean, I think that's where it all starts. I think that goes a long way in determining how competitive you can be as a football team at any level of football when you talk offensive line. And kind of the more I think about it, the more I think this could be really exciting. If Bostad really, those kids respond well and he really shapes them up quickly, we could be pretty pleasantly surprised next year by how well the offense is capable of staying on the field.
Yeah, and quickly going to running backs and tight ends. Really tough to judge the running backs in a spring game when there's no tackling and they blow plays dead. You saw Josh Henderson only had 4 touches, which is fine. You're not going to run your top running backs all that much in the final spring practice, especially when Christian Turner missed the end of spring practice with the minor injury and things like that. And it's a chance to go see what David Holloman had. I thought he ran well in the spring game. And then Jalen Lucas only got 4 touches, but you could see his burst going through the line. And he's going to break a few big runs, but they're not going to show anything other than you snap the ball and hand it to Jalen Lucas in that spring game in front of people. But he's going to be a difference maker at running back. We saw it at the end, towards the end of last year. Again, Alex and Andy, it goes back to like, what are you doing? You knew this kid. We knew this kid was going to be good in fall camp. He was everybody's sleeper pick for offensive breakout player pick. And what frustrates me is you go back to that Nebraska game. Nebraska could not touch him, and he got the ball 1 time. And it was that play right before the end of the half. It kind of gave you momentum, and then all of a sudden he disappears. So they're going to get Jalen Lucas the ball. And I know Alex is probably going to be annoyed at this, but he's going to be your punt returner. I think he's going to be the punt returner. And if I had to pick one, either kick returner or punt returner, I think I would put him at punt returner because it's a lot harder to kick away from him as a punter than it is as a kicker. And if you're looking to get him the ball, you probably could be more efficient getting him the ball as a punt returner than you are a kick returner. You could put Omar Cooper or Cam Perry back at kick returner, but it is so much easier, and you saw Purdue do it, that to either kick the ball into the end zone or kick the ball to the other side of the field of Jalen Lucas. And I know college coaches are stubborn, very, very stubborn, but you got to be a different kind of stubborn to kick the ball to Jalen Lucas on a
He's a weapon.
kickoff in a close game. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I don't
but
know. It depends on kind of what the kid wants to do too. I mean,
yeah,
obviously there's an increased risk for injury there potentially, and so if the kid's comfortable with it, they're like, my gosh, what a weapon he is
it's
in
also
that regard.
difficult to
And
catch. It's
yeah,
difficult to catch punts. People forget
yeah, it
that.
is.
I remember I caught punts for Tyson Beatty as he was preparing for his pro day at IU. And it's, I mean, people, oh, it's like outfield catching fly. It is so different. First of all, that ball is a bar of soap. These kickers like their balls, like the footballs beat up and all that stuff, and it's super slick. And then for these noon games at Memorial Stadium, Andy, that sun is coming right in your face in one of the directions, and it's really hard to see. So it's going to be interesting where they
Yeah.
deploy Jalen Lucas because,
Let,
and
let,
that's up to Coach Teagarden to you get creative. I know they did some funky stuff with when they had Tracy Porter and Marcus Thigpen back returning kicks with reverses and things like that. So it's going to be interesting what they do at those two positions.
the last time I tried to catch a punt, I fractured a finger. I was I was out of Liberty North High School practice, and they were doing punts, and they said, "Hey, Andy, catch one." And back in high school, I was no problem for me, but it turned out to be a problem. But it did not go well on my end. By the way, you mentioned David Holloman. He was one of the three guys that Tom identified at the end of the practice Saturday as one of the most improved players on offense. Holloman was a guy, and then EJ Williams and Aaron Steinfeld, the tight end, were the other two that he mentioned there. But I'll tell you one thing too, though, and I heard this from a lot of people, and I also saw it because I went to one of the practices when Christian Turner was still healthy. He's legit. He's
Yeah,
going to help, and so you've got Josh Henderson, who's deservedly going to be the starter, I think. A really good all around back, can catch the. We found out Saturday he could throw the ball too, actually, but he could catch the ball and really good all around back, tough kid, can get you extra yards and whatnot. Turner's a talent, and Holloman's really coming on. And then once again, you're going to see Jalen Lucas back there. I mean, I don't know exactly how the percentage split is going to be from him being in the offensive backfield and him being in the slot. Maybe it'll be like a 50-50 thing. I don't know. I'll tell you
yeah.
one thing. I was out of practice. I don't think they would mind me saying this. I was out of practice one time, and Taven Jackson and Jalen Lucas came around the end on a quick sprint draw or a quick sprint option kind of thing. And David Jackson got the pitch off perfectly. And when Lucas went past me, I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen anybody faster on a football field in Indiana uniform. It's like holy mackerel. So that looked pretty good too. So I mean, what do you guys think about that, Alex, and both of you guys? What do you think the percentage is going to be? Jalen Lucas in the backfield as opposed to Jalen Lucas in the slot.
It's a good question. I think a lot depends on Holloman and maybe Trent Holland. I think a lot depends on how those guys come along. I think Henderson and Turner are established, productive, experienced players. I think you feel comfortable with those two guys getting the majority of your snaps and your touches. But I think a lot of it depends on the other two guys at 3 and 4 on the depth chart. Do you make Coach Allen and Bell have to put Jalen Lucas back there? I think he'll be wherever they need to put him anyway, but it would be nice if you don't have to kind of hand it off and let him ram in there, which he did last year and he was okay at, but obviously not as strong, not as his best skill there. But it'll be interesting. I think a positive development for IU this year and growth, I think, in Allen's coaching style would be, and he talked about it a little bit, but a few more two-back sets, and you're going to say, well, why would you have two running backs if you can't run the ball with one, right? You can't block for one. Why would you block for two? But I think it opens up a lot of things in the screen game and in the passing game And I think what you're really going to see and what you should see is essentially how the Saints use Alvin Kamara in the NFL. I think
Uh-huh.
that should kind of be your model for Jalen Lucas. I think you put him in the backfield when you see he's got man on man or a linebacker on him. I think that's when you motion him out. You see kind of what the matchup is, and if you don't like it, you hand the ball off to Josh Henderson or Christian Turner. I think that's kind of the advantage of a two back set. But I think if you put Jalen Lucas in the slot against anybody, let alone a linebacker in the Big Ten, I think that's a matchup you like, and I think that's a matchup you should be looking for. So we haven't really seen it at all. We haven't seen it in a long time in Indiana, and especially not under Allen. But I think two back sets could be a new wrinkle and something he mixes in as a nice touch. But yeah, I don't know if I had to put a percentage on it. I would say 10, but I think it'll grow as the season goes because I'll be honest, I don't know how much I trust Holloman and Holland back there. So I think their hope is that they don't really have to put him in the backfield a ton, but I don't know. We'll see how it goes. We've heard that story before.
Well, it's intriguing what you said about the two back set, I think, because I didn't see enough of Turner to be able to opine about him. But I'll tell you one thing about Josh Henderson. He's a big, strong kid and could be a really nice lead blocker in the hole too.
Mm-hmm.
You can use the other back as the extra blocker at the point of attack. And
And
so, depending on what you're doing, but yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think probably Josh Henderson would be pretty good at it on the occasions when you ask him to do that. So
he,
we'll see. But
he could Henderson could also be used in the slot as well. He was used at
Mhm.
wide receiver last year. He showed he has good hands.
He's got good hand.
There's a lot of things you could do with these personnel groupings that'll make it difficult to guard. It'll be difficult to substitute against as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I do want to like put that warning out. It's a group with a lot of names, and we listed off a lot of names. So I wouldn't be surprised if one of Holloman's been here for a few years. Trent Howland's been here for a few years. If we see that position have some attrition to the transfer portal, just because guys want to play. Nobody
Yeah,
wants to sit fifth string or fourth string and things like that. So it's not a super negative, but you could see that work itself out in terms of who you're putting back there. But if IU enters the season with the top three running back room of Jalen Lucas, Josh Henderson, and Christian Turner, you're in pretty good shape. And you can move, like you said, you can move Lucas in the back, you can motion him to the backfield, and all those things. Quickly before getting to defense, we spent a lot of time on offense. The tight ends room. Aaron Steinfeld, I think, is a more athletic tight end than AJ Barner's been, and I'd like to see them use him more. He's a reliable red zone target. I think he could, run after the catch. He's not quite Peyton Hendershot, but Andy, we've spoken to this off the air as well. He's a tremendous athlete. He's a
yeah,
big
great.
baseball player at Bloomington North.
And a basketball player. I
And a
mean,
basketball
I
player.
saw him. I saw him score 20 plus on the basketball court more than once, and he's the only guy I've ever seen on the baseball diamond at Bloomington North. And people who aren't from around here won't really understand the magnitude of what I'm about to say. But he's the only guy I've seen at North pull the ball to left field and actually hit the ball off of the school building, which is up the hill behind the left field fence. And I've seen balls bounce and hit the school building. I'm talking about hitting it off the school building, and it was pretty impressive. And so, big, strong kid. His dad was a college athlete. Uh, really versatile kid. I think, yeah, he's more of the kind of tight end you want to hit up the seam. He'll get you yards after the catch. Really good hands. Bamba, and once James Bonda gets healthy, who's another Bloomington kid, he played at Bloomington South. I think he's more of your blocking tight end, but he can catch the ball too. And yeah, I mean, once again, I think the talent level in that room is adequate, to have a reasonably productive room. And so he was one of the three guys that was named most improved. I mean, it was him and David Holloman and EJ Williams. Um, and in terms of the spring performance. So we're going to go to defense here too. The two defenders that were mentioned as the most improved were Lewis Moore and Ladarius Cox, and I think
Yeah.
that's interesting as well. But no, I think once again, when you look at Indiana's skill position packages and the skill position rooms, if there is a functional, adequate level of play from the offensive line, I think Indiana's going to score some points because I think once again, if you're going to have a very young, inexperienced quarterback, but a talented quarterback, if the offensive line can keep them relatively clean and give them a chance to read the field and make plays, I think the offense is going to make plays.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it is, you hate to judge the opener because it's Ohio State, but have
Yeah.
some patience with it
Yes.
because there are a lot of swing games and winnable games after Ohio, between I think the Ohio State and the Michigan game that IU needs to get, that you'll see what this offense is and what they could do. Now, if they come out and can't score after Ohio State, they've got problems. But
Right.
yeah, I wouldn't put all my eggs in the basket. I wouldn't put any eggs in the basket for Ohio State at all. But switching to defense, Andy, the defense officially had won the spring game 25-17. But the guy who stood out the most, it was Andre Carter. He seemed unblockable. I had him at unofficially at 4 sacks. He probably should have had 6 or 7. A couple of them, I didn't notice he was offsides, but the refs
Yeah.
stopped the play because he was coming.
Yeah, he
And
was
nobody blocked him, and he had a sack. I believe it was him, was his sack at the end of the game on
at
fourth
the end of the
down.
game. Yep.
Yeah, fourth and goal from the 5 that ended the game. What was your takeaway from the defense? Albeit it was a non-tackling scrimmage. What was your takeaway from the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, yeah. Mostly, I'm going to talk about the defensive line because I thought it was, and Andre Carter. You're going to hear this from everybody, I think, around the program and people who actually watch the spring. But Lordy, that we all thought he was good coming in, and I actually saw him play for Western Michigan, and maybe you did as well. And I was watching Western Michigan play Ball State because I've got friends who went to Ball State, and I was watching the game. And I remember I kept saying to myself, "Who is that guy? My goodness, well, it's this guy. It's Andre Carter." And I think he's going to be a major player for Indiana and not just on the field. I mean, from what I've heard, he's already uh, impacting the locker room in a positive way too. And yeah, he was absolutely, he looked unblockable Saturday, and he's looked unblockable all spring. And I don't mean that to be just like an indictment of the offensive line play. I just mean he was hard to handle, and he wasn't the only guy who was hard to handle. Linnell Carr, the Bull. I thought Linnell Carr and Miles Jackson, those guys at the Bowl, they showed this spring, and I just liked what I saw from the defensive line in general. I mean, I thought Philip Leedy missed a lot of the spring being hurt, but when he came back, he showed up. I saw him. I mentioned Ladarius Cox earlier as being, very improved. I really like Dominic James. I mean, Nick James is, he's kind of the defensive line version of DJ Moore that we talked about on the offensive line. It's a kid who came in, pretty highly touted as a high school guy, and I think we're going to see that. Those are just some of the guys that kind of popped to me. But the defensive line looked active. It looked fast. It looked strong. It looked pretty deep. And they've lost some personnel there. I mean, I know that for a while we were thinking J.H. Tevis was going to come back, and it turns out he's not. And frankly, even though he played well for Indiana last year, I thought, I don't know how much we're going to miss it. I think the guys that I see stepping up and into those defensive line spots, I like pretty well. I mean, Marcus Burris, another kid.
Yeah,
That's another
PJ,
high.
was it PJ Lucas as well?
Yeah,
The
Yeah,
yeah,
two old
yeah. Patrick
Yeah.
Lucas. Yeah, I think there's guys, and that's what I like. I think for the first time, it's what happens if X player gets hurt on the D line. I think IU has legitimate bodies now. I
Yeah.
still worry about the pass rush. I think you're pretty much right now looking at Carter, Carr, and Jackson to generate all your pass rush. And I think those three guys are good. I think that's fine right now. Guys are going to get dinged up and guys are going to miss games, though. And that's where I look down. Not anyone I really love. I know there's one freshman that they really like, Sammy. The
Was
kid
Vincent Sneed or
from Louisiana. Incoming,
Jamar Monette? No,
no,
incoming freshman. Oh,
incoming.
Darius Collins.
Yeah, Tootie
Yeah.
Collins. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's another one. I think he probably backs up Carter immediately, which has varying success in the Big Ten. But looking at the D line, I guess you lost, counting McCullough as that bull D line. You lost him. You lost Co, who is obviously a pretty good nose tackle. And then Tevis and Bo Robbins are guys that both played last year too that decided not to come back. So you lost some guys. I like the guys you brought in. And I think really we talked about it a little bit with Matt Weaver, Andy, but we really talked about Marcus Burris and him being
Yes.
the kind of guy. He's a redshirt sophomore, former top 200 recruit. He's the kind of guy that Matt and I both agreed on as, obviously right now it's a lot of potential and a lot of, this and that you got to produce on the field, but he's the kind of guy you look back on when he gets called in the NFL draft and you go, how the heck did this guy play at Indiana? And
Well,
That's what I asked about
he's the
Andre
guy
Carter.
I'm watching.
yeah, and I think what you mentioned earlier about, well, it looks like all their pass rush is going to come from the edge. It's like, I don't know, because I think Marcus Burris can give you some of that from the defensive tackle spot, and I think Philip Leedy can too. So that's going to be intriguing. Can Marcus Burris, who once again, I mean, I think people are pretty excited about him. I'm gonna issue a shocking statement here that will surprise you and all of that. But this comes from people I talk with, and we're talking staff folks, and obviously I'm not going to name any names here. But Deshaun McCullough was, absolutely lived up to his billing last season. Wouldn't you say? Right?
Yeah.
He was really, really dazzlingly effective at times, and yeah, it turned out to be a tough season, and he wasn't as he didn't show out as much probably later in the year as he did earlier in the year. But he was a terrific talent, right? Wouldn't you guys say?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Are they going to Oklahoma? All right. I was told that we'll have an elevated level of play at that position this year.
I think having the
According,
guy from
according,
Stanford, Jacob Magnan Ferrara, has that
Yep.
same type of body type, except he's experienced.
yeah, but I mean, I was pretty stunned when I heard that, but it was pretty forcefully said.
Yeah. That
And
would be good
so
news. Yeah, that would
that
be great
would be
news.
great news. And that's and once again, this was from somebody who's not an excitable guy, right?
Yeah.
Not say something like that just off the cuff. But no, I was that intrigued me when I heard that. I was like, oh, well, so yeah, I mean, I think the defensive line really is kind of what jumped out at me defensively. And then, we'll talk about the linebackers and secondary as well. I think the secondary is the big question mark on the defense, just because it's like all new faces, basically. It's not because I think it's and I do think it's talented, but it's all new guys. And obviously, we just the program just lost Travell Mullen this week, which I really, really hate, actually, for a lot of reasons. I don't like that development at all. But I don't know what you guys want to say about that or not. But I think the defensive line has a chance to be formidable, which it kind of surprises me to say that, to be honest with you. I went into the spring thinking, well, we lost some guys who I think were pretty good, proven players up there. Let's see what we got. And what I saw was pretty impressive.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the secondary because, Alex, you've spent a lot of the spring talking about the corners, and that's your big worry as a secondary. Trevell Mullen entered the transfer portal earlier this week. Um, that's a big blow for IU. He's a former four-star recruit. He's a legacy. I'll call him a legacy Hoosier. His brother Taiwan was a big part of that turnaround in 2019 and 2020. You heard the story that he had written down those numbers of it had been 10 years from a winning season, 25 from a bowl win, 50 for the Rose Bowl or Big Ten championship, and to lose a guy like that who you have a good relationship with his family, with his brother, that's a tough blow. And it's something that there have been, you know, that's the guy IU has to get. It's you have a great athlete from a great family line of athletes, and they're sold on IU. You got him here, you got to keep him here, and you did the hardest part was to get him here. That's the hardest part to do. And there have been a lot of um, times where you go, why isn't a former player's son playing at IU and things like that. But for this, it was just a punch in the gut, and I think it hurts that room, especially, people are saying he was buried on the depth chart, but that competition should have been wide open, and it should still be wide open. I don't think, there was some separation of, okay, this guy might start or this guy might be in the two deep, but he had the talent. Andy, you saw him with the
Yep.
physical traits that, he needed to be successful, a
Yeah,
successful player.
he had great hips. He was taller than his brother, you know, and yeah, he needed to add strength and weight. Yes, we like a lot of freshmen do. And but yeah, I can't really conceive of a situation where he would not at least be in the playing picture, as part of the potential rotation, unless there's some other problems I don't know about, or there was a developmental issue with him as a player, which I don't know about. I don't get it. It's really it's disturbing, and because that's a family you have a positive relationship with. They're bought into the program. There's no. I don't understand why that kid is hitting the portal. It's like it just doesn't make much sense. Now, and once again, I mean, maybe he's behind guys even in his own class, like James Mons is a guy that I know they really like. Sometimes whatever, maybe there's just not a good fit with the way a kid wants to play or thinks he should play and the way the coach wants him to play. I don't know, but it was a disappointing and surprising for me a thing to see because yeah, I wouldn't have said that Travell Mullen was in position to start next fall at all. He hadn't surfaced to that extent. I hadn't seen him, that kind of status yet within the program. But he's got ability, and there's no reason why he should be discouraged about the possibility of earning playing time going into next fall. I don't I don't know. I mean, but I'll be interested. I'll be interested to hear what Alex has to say about that because Alex pays more attention to it and could talk more, I think, more knowledgeably about the current secondary. But that was a surprise to me, and I don't want to harp on it too much because there's plenty of positive things we can harp about, like Jameer Johnson, for example. There
Yep.
were some guys who surfaced this spring who played really well. But we
Yep.
got what did you think, Alex? Number one about losing Mullen, but just generally, where do you see the cornerback position, and who do you expect to see out there next fall, maybe in the two deep playing rotation?
Yeah, obviously don't know, but a bummer for sure. Anytime you get that kind of a body type and that kind of a recruiting profile to come to IU, I
Yep.
think that's a huge win for you. And Taiwan has been such an advocate for Indiana football and just Indiana
Yep.
athletics. So yeah, something fishy or something stinks there. My guess, with absolutely zero knowledge, but as I've kind of been looking more at the roster and position groups, the safety group I think is maybe the worst group of safeties Indiana has had set in a while. So
Mhm.
my guess, without any knowledge or sources, is that they approached Travell about moving to potentially play free safety.
Uh,
Uh, he's got a longer body. He's a
yep.
little bit bigger. So that is kind of my guess.
That's
And
interesting.
he didn't like that. Maybe
Hmm.
that's not what they promised him. Could be a million things. But if I had to guess right now, that would be
Hmm.
what I would guess, because he seemed like a guy and they are a family that we're going to work. I want to earn it. Don't give me anything. And he said that
Hmm.
multiple times. He was
Hmm.
fine with redshirting last year. So my
Hmm.
guess would be the staff looked at the room. They said, we are in trouble at safety. It's probably too late in the game here to get someone that's going to make an impact in the portal. Travell, what do you think? We're moving you to free safety or strong safety. And maybe he said, no, thank you. Uh,
Hmm.
that's my
Yeah.
guess. I don't have any insight or knowledge into that. So
It
that's
seems
not
like
a source or a scoop, but
it
that
it
to me
seems
is kind of something that would make sense.
it seems like a plausible theory. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And once again, I have no idea if there would be any truth to it, but yeah, I mean, something happened. I don't know what, and it could have been not one thing. It could have been something that
Mm-hmm.
slowly developed over time, or maybe just he and Brandon Shelby didn't hit it off.
Yeah.
It wasn't a good fit in terms of coaching style versus what the kid wanted to do. But it's surprising in the sense if it were something like that, given that Taiwan played for Shelby. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, they know how Shelby coaches and what Shelby's approach is. So it would surprise me if there was any kind of rift there. And as you say, there has to be some reason for it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was like some big program coming in and trying to poach him with a big bunch of NIL money either, because he hasn't played yet.
Right.
So I don't know. It was surprising news for me and disappointing news for all of us. But
Yeah,
anyway,
it could be a million things, but wish him the best for sure. But maybe it was
yep.
a feeling a little pressure to go there because my brother's there and everybody loves my brother,
Hmm.
and how could I not go there?
Hmm.
Everybody would be mad at me, but we'll see. But
Yep.
I guess looking at corners, if I had to pick right now, who's going to start against Ohio State? I think you go two transfers from the Power Five. I think it's Kobe Minor, and I think it's Jameer Johnson, who you touched on. Whether
Yep.
that's the correct answer is obviously to be seen. Whether that's who takes the field in week 4 as your starters is another
Hmm.
good question. I really like James Mons, and um, I really like Jamari Sharp. I think those are two young guys that you like. They were also true freshmen last year with Mullen, that red shirt,
Hmm.
and I think are guys that are going to play this year. So if I had to pick, that's probably my two deep at corner. I think Nick Toomer is kind of your swing guy. I think
Hmm.
they want to start him. It's coming from Stanford. I think they want to start him at corner.
Uh-huh.
But again, when I look at this safety room, I'm really worried about the safety position. You're moving Noah Pierre to free safety because you don't have any bodies after he was pretty good at Husky last year.
Yeah.
You're moving him out to safety again just to fill a starting spot. Is that the right move, or are you taking a sixth-year guy out of a spot he was good at? Is that a good thing? I'm not so sure.
Well,
But
they
you bring
did. They did name him the co-outstanding defensive player for the spring with Andre Carter. So I think they thought Pierre either they thought Pierre had a really good spring, or they're just trying to encourage him. One of the two.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So that's obviously a big one. I think he's kind of the leader of your secondary now, but
yeah.
he's a good player. He's been productive. He's kind of worked his way up and established himself as a solid player in the Big Ten. So he's great. But yeah, corner is super super interesting to me. I think with Mullen leaving now, we talked a little bit about it, right after.
Hmm.
But I think Jordan Shaw,
Yes,
true freshman that we flipped
they
from
really
Dion. I
like
think
him.
I think he's going
Yeah.
to have to be ready. I don't think you can redshirt him now. I think James Mons has to play too. So that was a
Hmm.
guy that they had to recruit real hard to get him to come to IU last year. So I don't know.
Well,
There's interesting guys. I'm worried about the depth.
as far as safeties go, they once again they did mention like the most improved defensive player in the spring was Lewis Moore.
Mm-hmm.
And there, so they did mention him, and I thought it was intriguing that Josh Sanguinetti was initially not going to come back, and now he's back, and
Mm-hmm.
he actually made a couple of plays Saturday that were impressive. Um, so so there's at least three guys. You got Lewis Moore there. I think they got Noah Pierre there. I think they think Lewis Moore's coming on, and Sanguinetti's got quite a bit of experience, and I don't think he's a bad player at all. And so some of the guys that they've had at safety though that they just haven't this haven't been able to develop, or the kid hasn't come on the way like Bryson Bonds, Philip Dunham played some last year. It's another guy.
Yep.
But I haven't seen those guys play really well yet.
Yep.
I don't
Another
know
guy
if
to keep an eye on, guys. Tyreek McDaniel. He was the number one safety coming out
yes.
of JUCO. And
Yes.
he has gone
Forgot
really
about
under the
him. Yes.
radar. He's gone really under the radar in spring in terms of coverage, but he's another guy that, it's you're replacing a lot, but the good news is that the last 2 years the secondary has been awful. So the bar
Yes.
might not be high to clear, but it is still a crapshoot.
Yeah, but you're right. But you're right about McDaniel, because I've heard once again, just folks. It's not that I'm talking to folks around the program all that consistently, but I do talk some, and that's another kid that they really like. That they really think could play. So we'll see.
Yeah, he's got the body for sure. That's the Husky position's interesting. I think Lewis Moore probably stays on the back end, but I don't know. I think Husky becomes an interesting one to fill now.
Yep.
I think McDaniel's kind of got the body and the makeup for that one. Jamison Kelly is another JUCO guy they're bringing in. There's bodies. Jordan Greer's played. This kind of feels like a make it or break it year for Jordan Greer as a junior, but my guy, I've talked about him, and I don't see a way he stays off the field as Amari Farrell. The incoming true freshman from Florida.
Gotcha. Yep.
He's so big.
The guy to me is just incredibly instinctive, loves to hit, very sound tackler. And he was a guy that when you kind of read other boards and, other guys that cover Florida recruiting, the consistent theme was, where is Florida? Where is Florida State? Where is Miami? What are they doing? And IU has had success plucking guys out of Florida. It's a good strategy. I love the strategy, but Amari Farrell is a dude out of Lake City, and I think he's going to play. I think you could play him.
He's going to be what Cam Jones.
Counting Husky.
He's going to follow the Cam Jones
path. Linebacker.
Yep. He's going to follow the Cam Jones path of he's going to start at safety. When he grows into his body, they're going to move him down to linebacker, because he is, and Andy, when we were down at practice, he's the guy, him and Jacob Magnum Ferrari, you go, okay, who's that guy? Like the whole get off the bus team, like without seeing them move, it's okay, who's number 25? And so it was Amari Farrell, and he just looks like a guy.
Right.
But let's move
it's like
to that.
When you look at the two true freshmen who I know are ticketed for the defensive backfield, and I don't know where they're going to play guys like Orlando Greenlow, or some guys are just listed as athletes or whatever. But the two guys that they're bringing in as true freshmen, with a cornerback in Jordan Shaw and the safety in Amari Farrell, I think are both exciting prospects. Both of those guys.
Yep.
Let's move over to linebacker. It's kind of a known commodity. You're going to have Aaron Casey, and Jared Casey are probably going to be your starters. I like Caden Turner. I thought he played well at the end of last year as a depth piece. Matt Holt practiced this spring, but he was in the blue jersey, coming off his shoulder. He looked like he had Juwan Morgan's shoulder, but he became that third linebacker when they played in run situations, and in that rotation. The guy who stood out to me during spring practice was Joshua Rudolph, the transfer from Austin.
I was just going to say him. Yep.
He's a little guy at 5'11" and 224, but he's fast. He could jump. He could hit. And the play that made me go, okay, number 26 on defense. Oh yeah, that's Joshua. It was like a one-handed interception on a pass across the middle that he probably would have taken to the house if they didn't blow it dead right after the play. So at linebacker, to me, you lose Cam Jones, who's an all-world talent, but you also are used to playing without him. He did not play after the the Nebraska game. So Aaron Casey has been in that leadership position, and he played his heart out last year. So I think, maybe you hit the portal for one more for depth pieces. But if you go in with, and you hope Isaiah Jones takes the next step too after
Yeah.
playing a little bit last year. But if you go in with Aaron Casey, Jared Casey, Joshua Rudolph, Matt Holt as your swing guy at linebacker, and Caden Turner and Isaiah Jones, I think you're pretty decent shape there in terms of talent and depth. Obviously, there's a little bit of a drop off behind Casey, behind the Caseys, but I think you're not as bad off as some people thought you were going to be when you lost Cam Jones.
I'll be really interested to see what role Mangum Farrar plays. I mean, that's a
Yep.
guy that caught my eye more than once in the spring. And once again, I
Yep.
wasn't out there all that often, but he caught my eye without doubt.
Yep. I think he plays that Deshaun McCullough role. He has the same
Yeah.
body type. He's a little bit more mature. And we said that, he's a little even look, Deshaun, when he's a redshirt junior or, that third year player, his ceiling's probably higher than Magnum Ferrara. But for right now, what you're replacing from last year,
Mm-hmm.
albeit McCullough was really, really good. I think Magnum Ferrara could fill in that piece if he could stay healthy. He has had injury issues when he was at Stanford, but he's a guy, if you could use him the right way, can be a really productive player.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. He just showed out to me a few times this spring.
Yep.
Can really run, really rangy, really, kind of a
He's
smooth,
long too,
yeah,
6'4",
smooth,
240.
smooth, really smooth and what's the right word? Rangy athlete. He's rangy, got length and speed. It's like, yeah. I mean, I'd have him out there somewhere. I can tell you that. So,
Yep. So let's wrap up here quickly, guys. I do want to touch on special teams for a second. Um, Nico Radicic has got to be ready to kick field goals because that was an issue in the spring game as well. Both Chris Freeman and Alejandro Quintero miss field goals and miss makeable field goals. So I don't even think it's a kicking competition. It's this job is yours. Don't lose it. But Andy, final thoughts on the spring practice and one thing IU needs to focus on this summer.
um, better play at the line of scrimmage, and no, I mean, that's not, you can't do a whole heck of a lot in terms of that during the summer. So to answer your question more genuinely, I think the key this summer for me is having both quarterbacks really establish chemistry and timing with the wideouts. That would probably be uh, at the top of my agenda of things I want to see happen. And once again, since we don't necessarily know which of the quarterbacks is going to emerge as a starter, I want both of those guys throwing a heck of a lot of balls with all the wideouts this summer.
Alex, one
Yeah.
thing for you. Yep.
One, kudos for having a spring event again. I was super bummed I couldn't make it down there, but that's an easy one. That's how you build future fans, future ticket holders. So, kudos to that. I think doing it like that's always positive, and you don't need to have a full blown scrimmage. So good for them for doing that. I guess the big takeaway for me is who knows how it shakes out, and we've talked about it a little bit, but I don't know what Allen is selling, but it's clearly still being bought by recruits and by transfers.
Mm-hmm.
After the last 2 seasons, you would think, IU's totally dead in the water, but Allen and his staff are kind of doubling down on what they believe in and what they want this program to look like. And I think after all the names we kind of ran through, it's a pretty good mix of guys you were able to bring in and kind of hopefully right the ship with. So be, rooting as hard as I can and hoping they all play well. It's not going to happen. That's never how it happens. But all things considered, with the last 2 years and all the turbulence and how things have been going, kind of coming out of COVID for IU football, I think kudos to the staff for kind of putting together a roster that I think can get you to a bowl game. So we'll see. But and then I guess for me heading into fall camp and in the start of the season here of just mindset I want them to kind of start playing with. And last year I felt like they played to not lose instead of playing to win in too many games. And IU is not good enough to do that. IU has to play to win. IU has to take chances and be aggressive. If you're playing to not lose, you're not good enough, and you're not going to be good enough next year to do that. So I think it's a key, small but key difference. And I think they have to be telling guys, get back to the old Tom Allen, especially on defense. Let's be aggressive. Let's take chances. Let's play to win, and let's not try to not lose.
I think it's all true. And now to build on one of the points that Alex made that is absolutely legit is that whatever Tom's selling is that people are buying. And in terms of the players still coming in, it was a good high school recruiting class after two seasons like that. And then the transfer portal was a real boon for Indiana. And once again, Indiana's transfer class was rated really highly. I mean, it isn't just us talking; it's outside observers saying that. But I'll tell you what I really liked, and I have to I'll just say it. In terms of newcomers coming in, I like the coaches. I like the coaches who came in.
Yeah,
the coaches who bought into what Tom wants to make this program. That's as encouraging to me as anything. And look, this is the time of year I'm always, just as a caveat, anybody listening to me, this is the time of year I'm always indulging in irrational optimism anyway. But, nothing makes me more optimistic, frankly, than the notion that some of the coaches that we brought in, I think, are going to be, frankly, a step up. And we already talked about offensive line and whatnot, but I like what I see and what I hear about the newcomers on the staff, not just the players on the field.
Yeah, I agree. And my one thing, first of all, the spring football event, I thought they did it spectacularly well. And in terms of finally having another one, they did a competition that brought the fans in, was interactive.
Free food.
Free food's always look, free food. People will come for free food, no matter what the event is. So, they opened up that south end zone. I had never been in there before. It's a unique opportunity to sit in those seats as well. The post game, having fans go on the field, get autographs, interact with these guys, interact with the coaches. Like you said, Alex, that's how you create the fan base. It goes back to that Simpsons episode where they want to go to the water park and they just annoy Homer all the time until he gives in and says, we're going to the water park. So it's going to be, hey, can we go to Bloomington? Can we go to Bloomington? All right. Well, if I take you to Bloomington, will you be quiet? Yes. But probably not.
I'll tell you what, I was standing there talking to some guys and I saw Taven Jackson signing autographs for kids. And I probably talked to my pals for 10 minutes, and David Jackson was still signing autographs for kids.
Yeah, and Donovan McCulley was out there till, Tom Allen was signing autographs until like the very last person was on the field. So that was great to see. What IU needs to focus on in the summer, I'm going to combine Andy and Alex's answers. Quarterbacks and reps are going to be huge. It's how are you going to build this team in the offseason to where you're moving as a unit. And I think that was one of the bad things of COVID. You couldn't build that team. I think that hurt the offensive line as well and the development there. But that's how you build depth. Who's going to be the leader to go out? Hey, guys, it's 5:30. I'm out of class. Let's hit the field. Let's throw some balls. Let's run some routes, things like that. Who's going to be that guy? And I think both quarterbacks could be that guy. And they'll probably do it in different groups because of schedules and stuff like that. But to me, mentally too, they have to be mentally tougher. They were a little bit mentally tougher last year because I don't think in 2021 you beat Michigan State. You probably lose to Western Kentucky and Illinois and some of those things. So I think they grew in that aspect. But you have to be mentally tougher. You can't if something doesn't go your way, and kind of like the Nebraska game, something doesn't go your way, you can't crumble. You have to flush it and move on to the next play. And I think that's something that maybe not directly in the summer, but there are going to be off-season team activities where they're going to bring somebody in I know they did it with like the Marine Corps, coming in and do it. Show this team some adversity and see how they respond, because the first adversity they see can't be Ohio State. It can't.
Yeah.
They need to see it in the summer, throughout the summer, and how you respond. And that's how you build that response and build mental toughness and things like that. So it's a combination of your two answers, but it, it's time. You're getting close to the crossroads of this program, and things like that. So it's time to get back to, like you said, Alex, the old school Tom Allen, be aggressive. And I think Matt Guerrieri does that. He's an aggressive defensive coordinator.
Yep.
He's not scared to get burned over the top. If he blitzes all out and a guy, okay, whatever, they hit a home run, we're going to get them the next time, and things like that. So,
Well,
um,
so something else that I agree with all of that. And before we sign off, something else that can and should get better in the summertime is the biggest question mark on the defense, which is the secondary. We
yep,
when you're talking that 7-on-7 stuff, and we talked about the importance of the quarterback and the wideouts really getting their act together in terms of timing and trust and communication and all of that. That's when the secondary can get better too, and it's going to need to.
yep. I agree. Well, Andy, thank you as always for joining us. Alex, thank you for joining us as well. We'll have all your summer content. Our countdown to kickoff, 100-day countdown, starts around Memorial Day. We'll cover all the players that are on the roster. The transfer portal is fired up. IU now has 8 open scholarships. Expect them to hit the transfer portal hard here before it closes, and maybe bring in some more guys before fall camp starts. We'll bring you summer updates. Hopefully, we get to talk to Tom Allen again one-on-one to do a state of the program and things like that. You can follow us all on Twitter at Hoosier Huddle. Keep coming back to HoosierHuddle.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave some comments. We'll do a mailbag, all that stuff. So thank you guys for listening. It was a real fun spring practice session, because we got to see it, because we have a lot to talk about as well. So enjoy the summer. It's going to go by quick, which as a teacher is unfortunate, but it will go by quick. And football season and fall camp are really right around the corner, and things like that. So thank you. And thank you, Alex and Andy, as always, for joining me.
That was great. Really enjoyed it. Thanks again. Good to talk to you guys.
All right. Good to talk to you too.